We need to save. It's not going to happen automatically, and in the end, it's hard to do, because what you have to do is you have to take in all the money and you have to look at it and say, I'm going to not use some of this for a very later date. And the idea of delaying gratification on anything is just a hard thing for almost anybody to do.
Well, welcome to episode 77 of The Real Deal, where real estate meets real life. I am your host, Janine Igliane, with my co-host, Ryan Hatcher.
What's up, guys?
And our guest today is Josh Jones. Josh and I have known each other for a while. Josh is in the financial world, a financial advisor. He is someone that I've worked with and have referred clients to. But I think you're also just like a really cool guy. So I'm excited to have you with us and to hear your story. And we're going to talk about all the things.
Yeah, sounds like fun.
There's a lot of stuff going on. So thanks for being with us.
Of course, yes.
So tell us about yourself. We want to know, like, where did you grow up? Where did you come from? And how did you get into the space that you're in today?
Yeah, okay. So born and raised in San Diego. I love that aspect. We grew up at the beach, spent the summers going to the Wild Animal Park and going to SeaWorld. That was fun. My mom was a school teacher, so she had the whole summer off that we could just go do everything. And being a school teacher, we went on a lot of field trips, which is great. So I enjoyed growing up at the beach, everything. We moved here after we got married, and so I think it was 2008 was actually when we moved here.
How did you guys meet?
Oh, we met through church.
Okay.
Good story on this one, and she'll tell the same story I do, so this is me replating her story. But she saw me talk at church. I just got home from my mission. I served a mission for 2 years in Mexico. Mexico. I was in Guadalajara, Mexico. So I got home and I didn't know her from beforehand. And I got up and I was speaking in church. And her and her friend decided that they were going to have crushes within the church, and they needed to pick someone to have crush. So she chose me for her crush, and she jokingly went home and told her mom she met her husband based off of looks alone. That's her words, not mine.
Okay.
Wow.
And so when I actually met mom for the first time, she actually gave me a hug and said, like, welcome to the family.
Oh, how funny. Were you like, what? Yeah.
No, it was good. And so that was Sherry. 18. I think we're going on 18 years this year, which is awesome.
Nice.
So,
and you have a few kids.
Yeah, we have 6 kids. 6 kids. They're all ours.
Yes.
And they're all ours, and no duplicates. The oldest, very proud, is going to college next year.
Nice.
So she's 17, turning 18. She just got into BYU, Idaho.
Nice.
Got a full ride scholarship. Very proud of her.
That's
awesome. And then next year we'll have her in college. We'll have 2 in high school. We'll have 1 in middle school, and then we'll have 2 in elementary school. So 6 total. Yeah. The oldest is 17 now, and the youngest is 8.
Yeah.
And so we have a very, very busy lifestyle.
So about 10 more years.
Yeah, about 10 more years of like the chaos and crazy. It's gotten a little better now that we have a few drivers in the house. And so having a few people to be able to help move human beings back and forth from places does help out.
Well, soak it up, man. You know it's going fast.
Yeah, my second one's going to get his license in about 18 days, and that's the one that worries me because he likes to drive fast.
Oh,
and
no.
So,
well,
the girl's a little better. The next one's the boy, and the boys can be a little different story.
Oh, gosh. When you said that, it just made my heart sink thinking about Chase driving, because he'll be 13, and so we have time, but I'm like, oh, dear.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The good thing is my wife is really patient, so she was able to teach them how to drive, where there was just zero chance I was going to be able to do that. That's just not my cool.
And I don't know how, I can imagine you're the helper, the driver, teacher. No, I'm not.
No.
Kara is?
Well, Cammie has a bad experience about that. So. I will some, but Kara has done most of it. Yeah.
We were talking and they were like, Mom, you just yell at us all the time. I'm like, because my life is in your hands and it's really scary. Yep. So of course I'm yelling.
Yeah, and we don't have that nice little brake, the brake,
the fake brake
that we think, Yeah.
And another steering wheel.
Yeah, that'd be nice if we had
Although that Centennial parking lot is where all of our kids have first gotten behind the wheel and practiced. Yeah. So I think they'll forever have those memories of like, I learned to drive in that parking lot.
I actually wish we had some snow every once in a while, because that's the best way to learn how a vehicle handles. go to a school or church parking lot in the snow and just play around, do donuts, because then you realize how it handles.
Well, I told the girls this when we drove up to Pine Top for Mallory's 17th birthday. It was like a huge snowstorm, and we had 3 cars because we had so many girls, and Mallory was driving behind me, and I'm like squeezing the steering wheel so tight, freaking out. My 16, almost 17-year-old daughter's driving behind me, like praying the whole time.
Especially if they've never done it before.
Right, Lord, keep us safe. Well, we get up there, and it was like kind of icy conditions, and another mom was behind us. So she was a third, and Mallory calls me, Mom, oh my gosh, I was fishtailing, but because I did driving school, I knew what to do. And so she knew how to like maneuver through that. And I'm thinking, thank goodness you're okay. Number 2, thank goodness I did that. And that there was a mom behind you, and like, oh my goodness. So send them to driving school.
Yeah,
It pays off.
Well, I don't know. Also, the problem in Arizona is when it rains 10 days a year here, no one knows what to do
right?
during those 10 days.
I was getting ready to say
when it's nice and dry and everything working the way it's supposed to.
People cannot drive in the rain, man.
Yeah, they did not know. Not around here anyways.
But what's crazy is when I got my real estate license, 6-7 years ago, they said that at the time, only 25% of Arizonans are natives. So like 75% have come from somewhere else. And I bet it's even more than that now. Yeah. So I'm like, well, how did you not learn how to drive in rain somewhere else?
Well, the problem is we're from San Diego. And so in San Diego specifically, it goes from raining 10 days a year to raining 15 days a year or something. It's
okay,
not
but
a lot
Josh,
of
I don't know if you'll remember this, but I used to work at in hotels, my shift would start at 7 a.m. I would almost always drive in fog.
Yes.
Where you can't hardly see.
Absolutely.
It's foggy, right? Yeah, Ian knows. He's in from San Diego too. Awesome. And so 6 kids. Kim is amazing. She's super supportive. You guys like to work out together.
You guys are a fitness couple.
You are.
We do. Yeah, we like doing fun stuff. I don't know. It was about maybe 10 years ago or so. I wanted to get a little healthier, and so
because when I first met you, you are not.
Yeah, I was heavier. Yeah, I was heavier than I was today.
Neither was I, though.
Yeah, I was heavier. I wasn't mentally as fortitude, So I was talking to a business coach, and he said one of the easiest ways to do is sign up for something hard, and then everything else will kind of push you to get there.
Love that.
And so I went and signed up for a Spartan, and my whole goal was to not look bad.
Yeah.
And so I signed up for a Spartan in the morning, and I went on my first run in the afternoon.
Spartan Sprint.
No, it was the big Spartan. It was
like
the bigger one.
Yeah.
It was the up in Fort McDowell, and so it was the one in the dirt and everything like that. And so I just didn't want to look bad. Now, if you've ever been to a Spartan, there's a lot of people that walk it, and I didn't know that at the time. So I just want to make sure I wasn't that person. And so I just started running a little bit every single day to make sure I was there.
Because that was how much mileage?
I think it works out to be about 5 miles or so, and
plus,
so that's what I was.
15 obstacles or something.
Yeah.
So I want to know what triggered that. What triggered that? You were, before you just fitness was not a big thing, right?
Yeah.
So what changed that? Because you went all in.
Well, yeah. There's a lot to be said about a strong mind is really it's really hard to be really good at the gym without being really strong in the brain, right? And I wanted to have more mental fortitude, and so I think I was doing it for the other reason. I wanted to become stronger in general. In my industry, to give you an idea, I think there's some numbers out there that something like 5% of financial advisors last longer than 5 years.
Oh, wow.
It's a really, really low number.
It's about 10% for realtors.
Yeah, it's just a low number. And why is it? Because constantly getting someone to say no to you over and over and over, and to pick up the phone. And so my goal, and this is what I had got from my business coach, is they said, do something much harder. And then when you come back on Monday, that phone's not going to be nearly as hard as running 5 miles and 15 obstacles and all the other stuff you do. Yeah. And so I just went and found obstacles. I found hard things to do. So since then, I've run probably 5, I think, Spartans. I've done 2 Ragnars, which are fun to do 24-hour races.
Yeah. Did we ever run that together?
I think we did one of them together.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's fun.
And so, it's fun to do things also with a community of people.
Totally.
And so I also found a good community of people at a gym that kind of helped out. But yeah, it really did come to the point where I wanted to make life easier, so I forced myself to do hard things in other ways.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's a whole lesson in that, right? In the doing hard things. I sometimes will tell myself that at the gym, like I'm doing hard things now so that I can do hard things later. And I think that's huge. I think the community aspect of doing hard things together is so helpful. It actually kind of becomes fun. And then building up, it's almost like a muscle, right? Like being able to exercise that muscle to do hard things. I tell my kids this all the time. You can do hard things. When they complain about something, I'm like, you can do hard things. I want them to understand that, like, that's okay that this is hard, but you can do it.
Yeah.
I love that.
I use that as a dad excuse. I say, well, guess what? Everything else is going to be easier, but you're still going to get that done.
Yeah.
So I don't like, I'm sorry the chores are hard today,
Right.
but you know, it'll make you a better person. So
Yeah, they probably love
Dude,
that.
of
I'm
course,
sure they
yeah.
love that.
0%.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there are several really successful businessmen that I follow on social, and they're fit, right? And they will all say the same thing. Start with your body, and your mentality will come with it.
Yeah.
And then your business explodes. You know, and they all say start with your body first. And it's because of the mentality that you develop.
Yeah.
And there are some aesthetic things too that come with that, right? And we're judged all the time. So if I'm super, super overweight or if I'm super, super fit, there's a different judgment, but I'm still being judged, right? So, you know.
So why finance? How did you get into finance?
Oh, this is an interesting one. I was talking to the same business coach, actually. He made an interesting comment once upon a time, and I'm like, well, this is true for me. So I don't know if it's true for everybody, but he said that most of the financial advisors in the world had parents that made bad financial choices. And I don't know 100% that's true, but my parents got a divorce when I was 17, and I think a lot of it was tied to a bankruptcy they had gone through when I was 16. And so I'm not 100% sure, but he said something like that. And so maybe in the back of my mind, there's some aspect of, I think I can fix the world by helping out people with finance.
Wow.
And so I also was just really good at math. And so just where numbers come very, very easy to you, it seemed like an easy fit. So I went on my mission, didn't know what I wanted to do. Actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And so I still, maybe as a second career, I'm gonna go do something else there. But so I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I came home. And I got a job working as an assistant for a financial advisor. And the guy ran a huge book of business, and it was out in San Diego. And as soon as I just saw what he did and the people around me, I said, I don't want to work for you. I kind of want to be you.
Yeah.
And so it took me about a year or so to get all my licenses, to get my stockbroker's license, get my insurance licenses, to kind of move in that direction. And then I went out on my own, and I've been doing that since 2005, 2004. So
Nice.
We're coming on a little over 20 years at this point.
So that's a lesson in that of like just trying something new, right? And just seeing, okay, is this something I like? And then realizing, okay, I do like this. I want to go all in on it. What does that process look like? What is the testing and all of that to become?
Oh, okay. So you have to get a stockbroker's license, and that's called a Series 7. And that allows you the ability to sell stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, essentially gives you the license to be able to buy and sell these investment securities. You also have to get, generally you want to get an insurance license too, because I'm more of a financial planner than the investment advisor. I want to look at the entire financial plan holistically. So we do look at investments, obviously we manage investments, but at the same time, what if something bad happens between now and retirement? There's always those other things that could possibly happen. So having a good offensive plan and a defensive plan put together is really the goal. And so generally you want to get your insurance license, which would help you to sell life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, as well as health insurance. Once upon a time, since the Obamacare kicked in, a lot of people that do health insurance just do that. And so even though it's the same licensing, I really don't sell health insurance. And most people that sell health insurance don't generally sell the other ones. It's become a little more of a division in that today. But then a lot of it is just knocking on doors, calling people, and all it is prospecting. It's a lot of prospecting to try to find people that are willing to work with you, as well as actually need the help.
So let's talk about that, because we have a lot of people that listen to our podcast that are entrepreneur mindset people. Maybe they have their own business. How do you acquire new customers?
How do I acquire new customers? At this point, I get referrals. I'm a referral-only business. I really appreciate that. My clients find people. They'll send people to me. And so I end up getting between 5 to 10 referrals a month or so. of people that are just kind of coming in the front door that want to sit and chat. But once upon a time, it was cold calling. I did work for Edward Jones for a stint, and the Edward Jones model is to go knock doors. And surprisingly, that works. Where
Did you
knock doors.
literally knock doors?
I did. So actually, I was working for Edward Jones when I moved to Arizona in 2008, and I moved in August. So I was knocking doors in a suit in August. Around here. And if you remember 2008, that was also where the market was dropping out. And so the market was falling, and I was out knocking doors day after day after day. It took me a little while to realize that people in Arizona don't trust you if you wear a suit. And if you're wearing a suit in the summertime, they trust you even less.
Isn't that
and
so
that's
funny?
It's crazy.
I developed this somewhere around 2009 when I realized like this wasn't working nearly as much.
That's why this is my uniform.
Yes,
It's so
it's an
funny.
Arizona thing, and
It totally
it's okay.
is. My dad tells that too, that he, being a realtor in California, right, always wore a suit, came here, and people would look at him like, why are you so dressed up?
Exactly. Yeah, if we didn't wear a suit, and if our shirts weren't cufflinks with monograms on it, you just weren't playing the game.
I love it.
And so I was actually literally at a lunch up in Scottsdale. So there are people around here, but maybe it's not the East Valley Gilbert feel. It's this, not that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's different too for luxury home sales. You know, I'm probably not going to wear this if I'm selling a $4 million house.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe
necessarily,
not
though.
though.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I mean, if you look at the Jeff Bezoses of the world,
for
even
sure.
Steve Jobs was kind of the first one that did that. We started coming out wearing T-shirts and shoes, and he was the richest man in the world.
I even heard that you go to a business meeting and the person you typically dress the most casual is the wealthiest because they can.
Yeah.
I remember Zappos. Remember Zappos when it came
Yes.
out? The shoe company. Tony Hsieh was the CEO, and he wore the same thing every day. In fact, I think he had a different color shirt.
He
every
just
day,
added
every day of
that.
the week. He just made it. So he didn't have to make the decision.
Yeah.
Right?
So, Josh, tell us, what are some things that you would say when it comes to investing or setting yourself up? I'm just going to say setting yourself up for retirement. Like, what are some, these are things that you really should be thinking about?
Saving. We need to save. It's not going to happen automatically, and it's hard to do, because what you have to do is you have to take in all the money and you have to look at it and say, I'm going to not use some of this for a very later date. And the idea of delaying gratification on anything is just a hard thing for almost anybody to do.
Especially in today's world.
Yeah, and so the idea of putting money away is difficult. Now it also becomes a little more difficult if you don't know what you're doing on that side too. And so that becomes another, it's like, I'm going to put this money away, but where am I going to put it? How am I going to invest it? What am I going to do with it? I don't quite understand stuff. And so
Okay, when you say saving, you're not talking about putting it in the savings account.
no, I'm talking about actually getting invested for the long term. So putting away a nest egg, something that you can actually live on and be able to pull back out. Savings accounts are okay. There's nothing wrong with them. They definitely have a place within the entire financial plan. But generally, you're going to use that for an emergency fund. You want to keep that for short-term liquid. Something you're going to use between the next 12 to 24 months would probably be the best place to be in cash. And the rationale behind that is, as inflation goes up and up and up, these dollars are probably going to, at best, keep pace with inflation. And I can say that today in 2025, but if we would have looked at that in maybe 2019, between the 2008 and 2019, the interest rates were significantly lower in savings accounts, almost down to zero, versus an inflation rate that even was very low at, say, 1 or 2%, versus what we've seen recently. But 2% you're losing 2% every single year.
By just having it.
Yeah, so the only thing you want that money in that savings account specifically is because of the fact that you might be using it soon. And everything else that you're going to invest is always going to have an upside, hopefully, that's what you're aiming for, but it's going to have some sort of volatility, which means for the short term, there also might be a downside. And that downside, if you go to use your money, if you put, say, $10,000 away because you're going to go buy a car in 2 years and you invested it, and then it's only worth $9,000, what's the purpose of that? Generally, the investments over long periods of time, that volatility, there's going to be more good years than bad years. And when you average enough of them out, you're going to end up making money, which is why long-term investing, you can actually have volatility. But if it's something short-term, that's where your savings accounts are going to come in.
I just had this conversation with Elise, my oldest, about her. She was looking at her Roth IRA account, and she's like, wait, this is less than what I had last month, but I put money in, and I had to explain that all to her. And I'm like, look, and it was nice because I think it sends like a little, almost like a graph, right? Where you can kind of see that. And I'm like, look at where it was this time last year. You know what I mean? And she can kind of see that, but explaining, it's going to dip and it's going to go up and down, but it's the longevity of it.
Yeah.
And similarly, I just had a conversation yesterday, I think it was, with somebody. Yeah, it was yesterday. And we're selling their house, and unfortunately, him and his wife, they're divorcing. He's like, should I rent? Should I buy? I want to buy. And I said, always buy if it makes sense. But if you're thinking, but for long term, if you're thinking, I just want to be there for 2 years, it's not a good place. Yeah. But if you're going to be there for 5+ years, then for sure. So same kind of thing.
Exactly. That's 100%. And it's not even looking at the house as sometimes not even looking at the house as an investment asset. You need to live there. How much are you going to pay in commissions up front versus selling it on the back end side, and what you could potentially just lose in some of the other aspects of it, versus the idea of having a house that's worth more down the road, because we're always going to need a house. So the primary house, generally, I don't even look at as an investment generally. I'm looking at as we need a roof over our head. You know, they say that the primary need water, food, shelter. That shelter is part of the primary. So we always need something. Secondary house, completely different story.
Right.
And that's a completely different story between Airbnb and renting it, or whatever the case may be. You always want to try to make money on your investments. That's a good choice. Right.
So the market's been interesting lately, and I'm sure you've had to maybe field some phone calls from people. What's going on?
Okay, so that's a good question. Markets go up and down. Actually, if you look at the markets today, they're not even at any kind of level that is historically even significant, to give you an idea. If you look at the intraday or the intra-year, changes, we generally see almost every single year drops that happen similar to this. And in fact, in 2022, we actually saw the S&P 500 dropped a little over 18% by the end of the year.
And we're at what, 15% right now?
No, we're actually less than 10.
Oh, wow.
We were at 9 a little while ago, and with all these bumps, I'm not exactly sure where we're sitting at exactly today, but it's less than 9% with all of the gains we've seen over the last little while. And so the idea of the market being so scary, and now the volatility is a different story. To see a swing that goes up so high and then goes down so low day to day, that is a little historical. To give you an idea, that big swing on the upside that we had was the third highest day since World War II.
Wow.
And that happened, 3 weeks ago too. So we are seeing day-to-day volatility. But that's also a lot of people paying attention to it. The news is making a huge deal about it today. And so a lot of people are paying attention to it, where the news wasn't saying anything in 2022. And that's probably why most people didn't feel that big pullback.
Right. And this whole tariff subject is scary for a lot of people. Let's talk about that. You enjoy talking about tariffs.
I don't enjoy talking about tariffs, but at least I've done a little bit of research. And so there's a couple of different conversations in terms of tariffs that we could have. It's the idea of the tariff, and then what's actually happening today. And so the idea of the tariff, there's a lot of bad information that's going out. They're saying tariffs is going to generate inflation. Mathematically, that's not true. Inflation is generally where you have to spend more of your dollars to buy something, or in other words, it feels like it got more expensive. Tariffs is a tax, which if they tax something and it gets more expensive, it's going to feel exactly the same as if it was inflation. But inflation is your dollar getting less valuable, and a tariff is going to be on something specific. So for example, we have a lot of tariffs on one country. That means all the goods coming in from that one country will get more expensive. But if there's another country selling it and we have no tariffs, that means those goods, but in an inflation world, everything gets more expensive, if that makes sense. And so as people continue to say it causes inflation, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And actually, we saw massive tariffs during the first Trump administration. If you don't know, we saw massive tariffs, and actually in the CPI, the inflation number, averaged over his 4 years 1.9%.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we're not going to see direct inflation. Now, does that mean our stuff is going to get not going to get more expensive? No, it probably will get more expensive.
Yeah.
At least short term, right?
Potentially short term, potentially long term. And now the idea of saying we're going to have tariffs and then pulling that back and then continuing to go and having this back and forth pull, that's generally making a lot of businesses uneasy because it's very difficult to make long-term plans, even if you're looking at a 90-day plan or a 1-year plan, heck, a 5-year plan.
Or where to build a factory.
It's very, very difficult to do that if you don't know how much or how expensive the goods, where you're going to buy them from, et cetera. It's very difficult to make that planning, and that's what's generally making the markets nervous, from my opinion today, is that we're just seeing a lot of people that just don't know how to plan.
Yeah.
And when you don't know how to plan, it's very hard to make decisions long term.
This episode is sponsored by Yvette Meyer with Old Republic Home Protection. For all your home warranty needs, contact Yvette at Old Republic Home Protection.
So I imagine you're having a lot more phone conversations, right? More conversations than you've had in the past, just trying to kind of manage some of that.
I'd like to say that's not true. I've actually had very little calls from my clients. I sent out a nice email to all my clients saying essentially, hey, I know this is happening and I know this is real. We're watching it, we're paying attention, and we're making moves when necessary. We're not making unnecessary moves. And if you have any questions, call me. And of all of my clients, I only had 3 of them that actually scheduled a meeting to talk to me. And a couple of them, I was actually thinking, these are some of my nervous Nellies. These are the ones they're going to want to chat about. We might be making some changes. And all 3 of them called. They had no issues with what was going on. Nice. What they did is they actually wanted to put more money in because the markets were down. So they were just like investing. Yes. So it really comes down to trying to help your clients understand what's going on, and then the trust that we built over the years. So between just the trust that they have in me that we're watching out for this stuff and they don't want to have to deal with it, and also just the understanding that we've developed that markets do go up and down. Yeah. This is the example I use for all of my clients because the markets went down and they say, oh, should we do something different? Or if they had said that, because they didn't. If they do, and I would say, so if me and you were going to go buy a pet, and we went and bought a horse, and then the next day I came back to you, I was like, can you believe how much this thing eats? You said, yeah, I think we all knew that. And if I was to talk to my kids, or any kids, and you say, do you know what the stock market does? They would say, the stock market goes up and down. I say, what's the stock market? They're like, I don't know. Yeah. So they don't know what it is, but they know what it does. And so the idea, it's just kind of the nature of the market to go up and down. The market has done that historically through any kind of scary situation. The markets generally will come down. And so you end up seeing that kind of volatility over the last 100 years, and the stock market is still significantly higher it is today than it was.
So I don't know if you can generalize this, but if you could, would you say stick it out, stay in the market, don't make any rash judgments or decisions?
The second part, yes. The first part, it would be a question of what you own. You know, if you own stuff that's not good, you should get rid of it, and it doesn't matter. But you should have an investment portfolio that works in good and bad years, right? And if it works in good and bad years, in the bad years, you have to trust it.
Okay. So what's one of the biggest mistakes that you see people make with their finances?
Trying to time the market. I think honestly, trying to time the market is probably a little more akin to gambling than people would assume, right? Markets are going to go down and they're going to go up. So the S&P 500, if you look over the last 100 years or so, it's had an average return just slightly higher than 10%. And I don't want people to think I'm like cherry picking the data, right? Because if you look at the numbers over the last 30 years, it's also right around 10%. So it's a number where the markets, if you give it enough time, are going to generally produce around a 10% rate of return. Now, can you make more by buying at the bottom and selling exactly at the top? Absolutely. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a DeLorean that has a flux capacitor. I don't have any way of knowing exactly when the top or the bottom is, but I know that at a good 10% rate of return of investing, diversified portfolio moving forward, we can generally get a lot of our clients to their retirement goals. And so what happens at the very bottom is people get fearful. And instead of using their brain to make the decisions on how to invest, they use their heart. And there's nothing wrong with the heart when you're picking a romantic partner, but it does hurt when you're investing, because when you get too fearful, you might make a bad choice. I did have one client, it was in his 401k, and it was during COVID. It was the very beginning. If you remember, in the very beginning in 2020, the market dropped 37%. Now, at the end of the year, it actually recouped all of that money plus some. So in 2020, we actually left with a gain, but there was a 37% drop in the beginning of COVID. It was very, very drastic. And everybody was doing the math and said, well, if we shut down all of our businesses and the whole world's going to die from this disease and everything's going on, I don't think I want to invest. And so he sold. He sold a little bit down. And it took him much longer than all the way back up to get back in. And so you get fearful and you're really worried about this, especially if you don't know what's going on and you're managing it yourself. On the other side of it, when the markets do really well, so we're looking at an average of a 10% rate of return. Last year, the S&P 500 produced over 24% rate of return. And that's not going to happen every single year. So you're going to have to look at that, and you're not going to have to get greedy to say, how do I chase that 25% return the next year and the next year and the next year? And understand that you're going to get a few 24% returns. You're going to get some negative returns. And when you average enough of them out, you're going to get a rate of return that's going to help you to hit your goal, which is the main goal. Most people want to retire with comfort and dignity.
How great would it be if people would just invest and leave it alone and forget about it?
If you had put money on the S&P 500 a long time ago and just let it sit, you'd be pretty rich.
Which is likely what's going to be said 20 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a controversial question to ask you, Josh.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on crypto?
Okay, crypto is an interesting scenario. I think my opinions are slowly changing a little bit too. The concept of how crypto started, I think, is very interesting. We have this idea of a fiat currency because it's not actually based on anything. And because it's not based on anything, someone wanted something that's outside of, for example, the Federal Reserve's ability of just printing more money. And so they wanted something that was fixed and set. And I think that's kind of the genesis of the Bitcoins and the Ethereums and some of them. Well, nowadays we have a coin for every single person. I'm surprised the home selling team doesn't have the home selling coin at this point.
Kidding.
But honestly, a lot of these new coins just feel a little more like pump and dump schemes. What they do is they develop something, they sell a bunch of them, it goes up really high, somebody sells, and then the whole thing comes back down. And it's completely unregulated at this point. And so in my industry, I have licenses, I have requirements, I have CE courses I'm required to take. If you are selling crypto out there, there's zero of that. And so it is the Wild West today. So I'm not 100% sure long-term where it's going to go. I think there's probably a place in the world where we're going to end up using some version of some of it, and it's going to be a viable tool in the future. I don't think that day's today. And I think it'd be weary for most people to jump into it without really knowing what it is. But once again, it comes down to if you're trying to buy low, sell high, that's probably more akin to what I would probably consider some version of like gambling with your money than it is long-term investing.
Okay, let's talk about life insurance.
Okay.
Because that's a big one that can really be beneficial.
Yes.
But there's different schools of thoughts out there. There's different options. Talk to us about life insurance.
Okay, so there's generally two different types of life insurance. The first one is term insurance, and that's generally what people have. And you should probably think of it kind of like a gap insurance. I want to be here and I'm only here today. And so you buy enough life insurance that if you die today, all of your goals are going to happen. So my goals is to be able to make sure my wife and kids are taken care of. I'd like to pay off the little bit left I have on my mortgage, and then also make sure that my wife is good for retirement. And so if I don't have enough money in my retirement, if I still owe some money on my mortgage and my kids are still around, those are all three things that I could do some math and figure out exactly how much life insurance. But also with a good financial plan, every single year, you should be paying off the house, the kids will get older, and you should be putting some money into your retirement savings. So that means that gap gets smaller every single year. So that's where I find term insurance to be a good. Generally, when you're really, really young, you need to buy as much as you possibly can. And the better off or the closer you get towards that finish line, the less you can have. So term insurance is not something that I think people should own their whole life. It's really just a good choice to have really when you have that gap. And honestly, most of us have the gap between the bigger mortgages and things today. There's generally a gap for most people. The second type of insurance is whole life insurance. And I think this is where a little bit of that goes up and down. There are a lot of companies that sell life insurance. There are 2 or 3 companies that actually sell a really quality company, really quality product. And so I don't want to lump bad companies in with good companies, but whole life insurance is something that's going to go your whole life. And so that's where it gets the name. Another name for it could be permanent life insurance, right? Because it's going to be permanent. But let's think, if I was to buy $1 million permanent policy today because I got 6 kids at home and a mortgage and everything we talked about, if all that goes away, why do I continue to need $1 million going forward, right? And so that's generally not a need for the average human being when they're trying to buy life insurance. So are there any added benefits? Yes. We could use whole life insurance in some different scenarios. So say you are pretty wealthy and you're doing pretty well off. If you wanted to take a few dollars and you throw it towards a life insurance premium that's going to guarantee to pay out, very often if you look at the rate of return at the guaranteed death of a human being, because we're all, like death and taxes, the two things that are guaranteed in life, right? So we will die one day. That means that is a very efficient way of transferring wealth from us to the next generation, because life insurance comes out tax-free. And so imagine a person maybe putting $250,000 over their lifetime into a life insurance policy that pays out $1 million to give to the kids and the grandkids or whoever else the case may be. And so it's not for everybody when you're using things like that. Now, there was actually a great study. It came out by Ernst & Young. They actually it was called The Benefits of Using Insurance in a Retirement Plan. And they talked about specifically annuities and using whole life insurance, or the cash value that can accrue inside whole life insurance, as what's called a volatility buffer for down years in retirement. And they ran the numbers and they said, okay, so here's one scenario. We're going to have an individual that's just going to put money into their, say, 401k, and they're going to save based off of the normal rates of return that we see. And they ran all of it kind of like a financial plan for a fake human being. And then they made that person get a little bit more conservative by adding more bonds in the portfolio, a little less stocks in the portfolio as they get older, which is generally the path that most people take. Then they compared that same person to someone that, instead of taking 100% of their money and putting it in this direction, they put only 80% of their money in the direction. They put 20% of that same savings dollars into a whole life insurance strategy. And so they're taking the same dollars and saving it, but now when they got to retirement, they had all of this extra money that was sitting in a pretty decent kind of safe tax, we call it tax advantage, because you can pull some of it out tax-free if you do it right. And they had this extra money that was essentially not correlated to the stock market, not correlated to the bond market, and making a pretty decent rate of return without having to pay taxes over here. Then that person, because they had this money over here, their investments didn't have to get more conservative. But what happens when you go to take money out of account, when you're taking money out, if the stock market's going down, now you're now buying low, because in retirement, you need to take money out every single year. Yeah. And so if the stock market's going up and down like this during retirement, that becomes a problem, unless you have like a safe bucket over here or something you can pull out during the bad years. So EY did the study showing how much you could pull out based off of having money in the stock market and in a whole life insurance, even saving the same dollar amount. And they showed that they could bring significantly more income at a safer rate and still even have more money for the kids and the grandkids afterwards. And so putting the right amount of whole life insurance with the right company, it can't be with just any company, but putting the right amount of money in whole life insurance with a well-structured policy that's focused on the cash value would be a good strategy for a lot of individuals, as long as when they're saving for retirement too.
Have you heard of the concept of infinite banking?
I have. I'm not a fan of that.
Okay.
No, not a fan of that. It's using one of these policies. Probably it's using the policies to not what they're designed for. Yeah. Okay. And it's very, very dangerous, I think. And a lot of people, the kind of policies they're using them in is called a universal life policy. And the universal life policies have a lot of internal variables. I kind of compare a universal life policy like a whole life insurance policy for a do-it-yourselfer. There's no rules, there's no guarantees. So you have to put X amount of dollars based off of government laws. But if you wanted to put in a little less, you could. And that becomes a little dangerous when you have someone who's already having a hard time saving, like we talked about earlier, and now having to put more money into this policy. And so I'm not a fan of the infinite banking.
Okay. I want to talk to you, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk to you in kind of like age groups.
Yes.
So let's think about our kids, 0 to 18.
Yeah.
What are some things that we should be thinking about as parents on their behalf?
I would say, this is from my own personal experience too, just teaching them about money. You don't want it to be foreign to them. When they get their first job, they should understand just the general basics. And the problem is, if you don't know yourself, it's hard to teach them. And so that becomes an issue. But for them, I would love them to understand general budgeting. I'd like them to understand how to use credit and not owe anything. I think using credit in the world today, for example, having a credit card and understanding the values of some of the liability that you can have by swiping. And if someone steals your card, then you're not. But if you have a bunch of money in your wallet and you lose your wallet, that's just completely you're gone. And so just teaching them a little bit about how to use the money in the world today, and also generally the value of money.
How do you teach your kids?
They all have little savings accounts. I give them all in an allowance, even if they don't do their chores. They still get the money every single month or every single week because of the fact that we want them to have enough money to spend. And so we do that. My older kids actually have bank accounts and savings accounts now that they're working and things like that. But that's really all we're at this point.
What about life insurance, 529? Roth IRA, what about any of those
That's
products?
generally for the parents at this point, doing it for the kids' background. A 529 account, once upon a time, I wasn't a huge fan of a 529 account because we generally, to have enough money in a 529 account to do anything, you kind of got to start when they're zero.
Yeah.
Right? The day they're born, you got to start, because you're only going to be putting in a couple $100s a month in this account. So you can have any kind of amount of money that's going to be used for the high cost of college. You're going to start early. And I don't know about you, but my kids came out really blank slates. I couldn't tell if they're going to go to college, if they're going to be smart or not smart or whatever the case may be. So I've always kind of had a love-hate relationship with that. They did change the rules recently, which I really, really like. And the rules have now changed, allowing up to $35,000, and I think this is as of this year, $35,000 of a 529 to actually get rolled into a Roth IRA on their behalf. And so it works out to be the equivalent of about 5 years, because today you can put $7,000 in a Roth IRA. And so you have the equivalent of putting in 5. So for example, if your kid doesn't end up going to school, but you put a bunch of money and then they end up getting a job at a trade school and they're working, well, they're not going to be making a lot of money the first 4 years or whatever, but they could take that 529 and essentially now they're saving for their own retirement by transferring those dollars. And so it becomes very useful. I think there's a tax write-off in Arizona. I think you do up to $4,000 per year. Don't quote me on that number, but it's some amount of money that you're actually able to put in and actually get off on your Arizona taxes as well. So
okay. All right, next age group.
Yes.
What would you say that is? Like
gosh,
I would say
20s?
like 18 to 30.
Well, let's assume that they're married and starting families
Okay.
at this point.
Yeah.
I would probably just do your best to try to keep a good emergency account around, because that's where you're going to have most of your emergencies and you're not going to have any backstop. There's not an old 401k that you could do a loan from. You can't pull equity out of your house with a HELOC. There's no real options. And so an emergency account, I think, would be first and foremost for everybody.
How many months?
3 to 6, I think the numbers. Dave Ramsey actually has a really good concept of why 3 or why 6. If you have a job like ours where income might be variable, you don't know exactly what's going on, then at that point you probably want to have 6. But if you have a nice steady job, maybe both spouses are working where there's good income coming in, there's good disability insurance, so if something bad happens, then at that point maybe you can have 3, get away with 3, but at a bare minimum 3 to 6, because it's not always going to be just to replace your income if you're hurt or something happening. It also might be you need a new roof or you need a new air conditioning unit or something. And I found generally if you have about at least 3 months, depending on what that is, it's generally going to hit at least maybe 1, maybe 1.5 of those big issues. And it's the bad thing is when all of them happen at the same time, and that's where you hope
Sometimes
you have family or
life
something.
happens.
It does happen.
All right. And then I would say like our working years, right? Like we're in our careers, we're working, we're not retired. What do they need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so most people, if you start early, you can start saving about 10% of your income, and you'll probably have enough money by the time you get somewhere between 60 and 70 to live on a good replacement of what you're living on beforehand. That's the number. Most people don't start that early. They don't start at their first job when they're 19 years old. I definitely didn't. And so once you get a little older, then at that point, the numbers, and I generally give this to most of my clients, if you can save 20% of your income, the likelihood that you'll be able to retire on time and retire comfortably with dignity is a good number. So saving upwards of 20%, not upwards.
In the S&P.
Generally in your 401k is a good place within that. And then finding some investments that are a well-diversified portfolio of generally the stock market. Different stock markets. You have large, mid, and small, the 3 different types of investments you can have. The big companies, which would be the S&P 500, but also mid-sized and small-sized companies also do very well. And also the volatility of each one of those generally aren't on the same year. And so if you have one go up, the other one goes down. And so your overall portfolio is going to feel a little calmer for the volatility. Because remember, we were talking about that emotion aspect. This is one way that you can kind of limit the emotion that you have by having a diversified portfolio. Because if you have something that's aggressive and something else that's aggressive, and something that's aggressive, but the portfolio ends up becoming a little more moderate by putting it all together.
You said with dignity. What do you mean by that?
I don't want people to have to be begging for money. Yeah. I don't want them to have to worry every single day that Social Security might be getting cut or something's going to happen and they're going to be able to lose this. I want them to be able to enjoy their lives. I don't want them to have to consider maybe options. Yeah, I want them to be able to go on that vacation they want to. The things that they've been putting off for years because of work and because of kids or whatever. I want them to go see the Leaning Tower of Pisa or whatever was on that bucket list. Yeah. And so I'd like them to have the ability of just doing what they want to.
Yeah. Josh, what did we ask you that we should have?
I have no idea. There's, I don't know. You didn't ask me about any good jokes.
Oh, give us one.
Okay. I'll give you my favorite. Okay, so have you ever seen how ducks, they fly in a V?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was watching TV the other day. Do you know that there's always more on one side? That there's always, it's a little longer on the other side. Do you know why?
No.
Because there's more ducks on that side.
Thank you.
Dad joke.
Yeah. That's it.
That's awesome. How can people find you? If someone listened and they're thinking, hey, I want to meet with this guy and maybe he can help me plan for my retirement, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. I actually work with clients all over the country. And so I was doing that before COVID, where everybody learned how to Zoom. All of my clients knew how to Zoom before that, which is kind of nice. And so they didn't have to learn how to Zoom during the middle of COVID. But I work with people all over the country. You can find me on my website, as well as, I think website would probably be the easiest way. I have a couple of social media accounts.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we link it in this video. We like to end with a speed round. Are you up for our rapid fire questions?
Okay. Let's
do it. Favorite color?
Red and blue.
Oh, two.
Red's my favorite color. I like to wear blue.
Patriotic.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite food?
I do have, Mexican food. I'm from San Diego. And it's not all Mexican food. Even though I lived in Mexico, it's actually San Diego taco shop food is hands down the best.
We don't have that here.
It's not the same.
I miss it, right?
It's not the same,
It kills me. Do you have a favorite drink?
Water.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I like water.
Okay, favorite sound?
Favorite sound?
Cha-ching.
That's a fun one. No, I like the waves of the ocean.
Yes.
Actually, I have some fish tanks in my house, and so I like the sound of the running water.
You know, just being by water can actually be very good for you. Okay, do you have a favorite book?
Oh, favorite book. My favorite author on the fiction side is Dan Brown. I really just enjoyed reading his stuff, even the non Da Vinci Code, the stuff beforehand that he wrote. I really like Dan Brown. The Book of Mormon's probably my favorite.
Okay.
I'm reading that again for the 50th time or so right now. So.
Okay. Favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast? I have like 3 or 4 that I really, really like. I like Tucker. I think he just asks hard questions and he doesn't bring on everybody that disagrees with him. And I think
I do love that he'll bring on did you watch, by the way, the airline pilot podcast that he did with a female airline?
Yes, I did.
Amazing.
I thought that was great. I felt very bad for her actually when she was talking about how people look at her with the whole diversity push. She goes, "No, I did this. I've been doing this for 20 years old." She goes, "You can call me an." I do appreciate that.
Okay. Last but not least, do you have a favorite vacation?
Oh, favorite vacation? We've gone to Hawaii a few times, and I just love Hawaii, but not all of Hawaii. We go to Kauai.
I was going to say, what island?
It's Kauai because it's the Garden Island, and we like to hike, and we like to be in the water, and
That's the only one I haven't been to.
Really, it's my favorite island for sure.
It's like, from what I've heard, it's like very, very peaceful, which is good, and we like that.
Commercialized.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We got to go. Well, thanks for being with us,
Absolutely.
Josh.
Thanks
we
for having
appreciate it. And I guarantee you someone's going to listen to this and learn something new. I know I did. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you around.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Real Deal podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe, and you can follow us on social media at the Home Selling Team AZ.